Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. This is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will talk about the challenges and triumphs of living with NVLD, that is nonverbal learning disability. And we will not only be talking about the challenges that I have personally, Jennifer Lynn Purcell, but also the challenges that other NVLDers have in their life with having that learning challenge. And I also like to broaden out to other learning challenges like autism and dyslexia and ADHD and Asperger's to try to be more inclusive and to compare and contrast the challenges that we all experience as neurodivergence. And I also try to include neurotypicals in it as well as terms of saying that they might experience similar challenges, but to different degrees than neurodivergence do. And to try to say, hey, this is how we can help each other with these challenges.
Like so relieved because
Mhm.
now I had an answer to all the challenges
Yeah,
I
it's
had
like
growing up.
epiphany, right?
Yeah, like the light bulb went off. Ding.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Um, but I mean, I know some of the people I've interviewed for the podcast, they weren't diagnosed until like even later than me, like 56 or like
Wow, that's interesting.
older. And I think that's even more challenging because then you go through more of your life, like you're saying,
Yeah,
wondering and being overwhelmed.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and I used to feel this way, maybe you did too, of it being a little bit of a burden,
Mhm.
but not so much anymore with being able to work on things more.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely still sometimes in a way feels like a burden, like,
Hmm.
just with certain things and you like relive certain moments in your head of,
Hmm.
different social interactions that maybe were super awkward and you start to relive those situations in your head or it's like, oh, I shouldn't have said that or
Right.
you lose friends sometimes too because of how you are with your NVLD. So yeah, I do definitely feel in some ways it is a burden and math is still super frustrating, like just
Hmm.
super simple things that people can do, I can't do. And, it's so frustrating to, educate others and help them understand, like, I can't do that. Like, I can't read a map.
Yeah.
Like, I know it seems simple, but I can't. Like,
Hmm.
I can't do it.
Yeah, I have a challenge with reading maps too. Like for me,
Yeah.
I don't know the compass directions very well.
Yeah. Me
And
too.
um, although in college, the way I learned the compass directions were actually easy because I just kind of was like, okay, which side of campus am I on? Because we did often say south, west, or east or north.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got that better.
That's good.
But then when I was outside of that, I'm like, I have no clue where those are.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like I don't know if it's NVLD or if you're similar in this way, but I almost have to take like visual pictures in my head and
Hmm.
of snapshot places so I remember like, okay, if I remember that place, then I know that is close to that. So for example, I had to go down to Toronto, downtown Toronto recently, which is a huge city for my graduation, and I was better with like directing myself than my boyfriend was. And he's like, how did you know where that was? I'm like, I just remember because I take like pictures in my head and it kind of
Mm-hmm.
helps me remember key locations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I try to remember landmarks better than
Yeah.
street names or left or right turns.
Yeah.
Because for me, I guess when I'm driving or when I'm trying to go somewhere, if it's a new place, and I go there again, then I can usually do it without a GPS because I can remember the landmarks along the way,
Right.
which I think
Right.
is
That's
interesting.
good. It is interesting. I'm like, I don't know why I remember this, but I do. I remember
Hmm.
that is that and that this and, and just all connects together.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I don't know why I'm good with
Oh,
memorizing names or numbers, but I'm like, you know what?
yeah.
It doesn't matter that I don't
It
know and I just can
it
do
just
it.
it almost makes you think like maybe because of the damaged parts in your brain from NVLD, maybe it like rewires it. So like, you
Hmm.
have strengths in certain areas compared to others, right? I don't know. It's, your
Right.
strengths override your weaknesses, maybe. Who knows, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Um, what would you tell others who have NLD as a motivation when they get discouraged?
Yeah, so do not let the label define your life. You're
Hmm.
definitely more than just your label. You have strengths, you have weaknesses, and that's okay. Just, keep working with your strengths, keep
Hmm.
conquering your goals, keep, chasing your dreams. Don't let the label define who you are. And neurodiversity, I think, is also something that a lot more people should research. I think it is being brought more to light now. People are identifying as neurodivergent, which is pretty cool. So I
Hmm.
think, if you do have NVLD, just research about the neurodiversity movement and, you'll kind of understand like, it doesn't define who you are. You have strengths and gifts too, despite your disability.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's
Mhm.
it's good to focus on your strengths because if you focus too much on your weaknesses, it can really make you feel like you are
Yeah.
stupid or you can't do anything, which isn't
Yeah.
true. Um,
Exactly.
and also for me, what I use in motivation personally is try to remind myself of when I do get discouraged of how far I've come on working on my challenges
Me too. Yeah, exactly.
because then you're like, well, I am doing good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For sure. You have to like look back and see how far you've come. Like
Hmm.
I was always told when I was formally diagnosed as a child with NVLD, I was told by psychologists and numerous teachers like I wouldn't make it past high school. I wouldn't amount to anything and but I was basically stupid and they never saw me going to college or university, but
Mm,
I made it this far, so you can definitely
you
look
prove them
back and feel
wrong.
good. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Prove them wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I did that too when I was accepted into UC Berkeley. They actually wanted me to go to a summer program that they have that is sometimes required or recommended. For me, it was required um, to do. It was basically like a test to see if you could handle the academic level of Berkeley, which is pretty high. Um,
Mhm.
and you would take a couple courses and see how you did. And if you passed them, then you would be able to go to there for 4 years.
Wow.
And I remember, I mean, at the time I didn't know I had NLP, but when I was talking to my counselor about it, because I, I wasn't, I was passing my courses, but I wasn't doing any better than a C. So I asked, could I, have pass, no pass, so I could start with a fresh GPA? And she said, yeah. But I asked her, why was it required? Because I didn't know until I asked. And she said, it's because I was homeschooled before
Oh, wow.
college. They didn't think I could succeed at Berkeley. And
Wow.
um, that did make it a little more challenging because I mean it was online and I had to adjust from doing school on a computer to doing it in person and
Hmm.
then to oh yeah, I have more than just one person in my class now. I have like
Yeah.
thousands
It's
more.
like the transition is
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah, that was awkward.
Yeah. I
um
can relate. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know you were homeschooled. So
yeah.
I was also homeschooled for a few years because
Okay.
like it was kind of to the point where I was going to a small rural school
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and I think I was the only identified child at the time with a learning disability. So like
Mm-hmm.
they didn't know how to teach me, and the teachers were just
Mm-hmm.
frustrated and basically giving up. So my parents withdrew me, homeschooled me for a few years, and then they finally admitted me into the special education program, but I had to take a bus that was like an hour
Oh,
away
wow.
from my house. So it was like reintegrating yourself back into that educational environment, and it's so awkward, like
Mm-hmm.
your social skills and everything else that go along with homeschooling. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. For me, I remember when I was going through college, which for me was a nightmare because of
Mhm.
having NLD and just trying to adjust with that and being away from my family.
Mhm.
Um, but what made it easier was when I got my accommodations for my junior and senior year, that made it a lot easier. Before I had C's and then I went up to A's and B's.
That's awesome.
Um,
Very similar to my story.
yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was like a C, like I was like a C D student all the way through
Hmm.
public school. And then I feel like it was around, I think, grade 6 or grade
Hmm.
7 when I had that one teacher who actually taught me. And,
Mm,
she just saw my gifts and she just had a way about her that just really empowered me to succeed. And it just takes
hmm.
that one teacher to turn around your life. And I went from, a C and D student to flourishing with A's and 80s and 90s. And it was just like, wow, like it just
Yeah.
that moment just turned around for me. So it was really interesting.
Yeah. I remember when it turned around for me too, because I mean, it wasn't only the accommodations when I tried to describe to the teachers that I knew would take more time to help me if they could.
Mhm.
Um, I had this one teacher assistant who he was so generous and kind with his time with me. He would
Oh, that's so
let me take
nice.
extra office hours. He would help me with drafting my essays. Um, and that really helped because I it was a social theory class and that
Oh,
was hard
wow.
having NLB being
Oh,
very
I can
little.
imagine. Oh my goodness. Must have went over your head. That's like
Yeah.
abstract thinking.
Uh-huh.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah,
times it did.
that's
So
awkward.
I was, you know, that was it was awkward, but it was also at the same time, um, you know, I I didn't tell him exactly what I had, but I he knew what I had challenges with.
Yeah.
Um, and actually I did an interview with him for this podcast.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cool. That's awesome.
and that was interesting because he I feel so special. He actually listens to the podcast and he is now a
Really?
professor at NYU and
Wow.
he teaches what he was helping me with and he tries to use it to help the podcast to help his students more, which I think is amazing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. It's always that feel good moment when you have
Yeah.
like certain teachers and, certain people who just understand and like touch you in a certain way, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember that one teacher I had from like grade 6 to grade 8 and she just saw beyond my disability and she kept
Hmm.
empowering me to go forward, keep going and part of the reason I did go to college and university is because of her. So
Mm.
I even went back and volunteered in her class to kind of pay it
Hmm.
forward. And it was
Mm.
just so special having those certain people in your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Definitely for me too.
role
Um,
model. Hmm.
again, for people who actually, this is for people who think they have a learning disability, but they're not sure, what would you encourage them to do?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think there's still like a lot of stigma with like knowing something's wrong with me or something's
Right.
wrong with my child. I think or suspect it might be NVLD, but I don't know.
Hmm.
They are expensive. I don't know if it's different in the United States if the government covers it, but psychoeducational assessments are, definitely the way to go if you do suspect you have
Hmm.
NVLD. I know my parents unfortunately had to pay a lot of money for my first one, but then the college one was covered. The government covered it. So it's interesting
Hmm.
how that happens. I have no idea how it is in the United States, but I know in Canada it can be very expensive if, the parents have to do it outside of the school at all.
Yeah. I'm not so I was trying to think of how it is in the US. I know for
Yeah.
me, it was based on the household income. So
Okay.
because I did it through a um, institution that is connected to Berkeley, it was easier, but they the price was based on the household income, and so it wasn't as
Interesting.
expensive as it could have been. Um,
Right. They
but
are pretty expensive. I think
yeah.
my parents, when I was first diagnosed when I was 7, I
Hmm.
think they spent $1,000 or $2,000, they told me, which is crazy. And it's only
Hmm.
like a 1 day, I think it was like a day and a half long test, right? Like,
It
a
was
couple of
different.
hours. And it's like really like all that money just to be like diagnosed, it's crazy.
Yeah, so
Crazy.
it's definitely different over here, even with the testing. So for me, it took probably a few months just to get the appointment. Um,
Yeah, definitely.
and the price was different because of how the system works. I think it was 250, um,
Oh,
which is way less, but
yeah,
it could have been a
significantly.
thousand or 5,000. It could have been that.
Yeah, that's so
Um,
crazy.
and
So crazy.
for the testing, actually, I think I did it over a week because they did like I think almost 20 different tests, and
Wow. Wow.
um, some of
Yeah.
them sometimes we could do more than one in a day, but depending on how long it took.
They're
Um,
they're very lengthy and tiring.
yeah,
I
yeah, they
remember those
are.
tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they're very long and tiring and you're just exhausted
Hmm.
after and um yeah, I do remember going through that and it almost feels like you're just like a hamster, right? Or just a little lab rat for the day and they're studying you. And then I don't know if it's the same in the United States, but something frustrating that we have to go through if you decide to do college or university, the educational assessment expires every 5 years. So then you have to redo it again
Oh,
and go through the same test. And it's basically just to like signify, yep, she still has NVLD. Like
huh.
it's so
That
stupid,
is
but
stupid.
it is very frustrating.
There's no cure for a learning disability,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
you have to go through it all over again. uh,
Um, I don't know if it does expire because I did I did my and I'm marveled that I did this, but I did it in 4 years. And
okay.
it if it does expire, I didn't have the time to, fortunately.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I don't I don't think it would though, because it if I think about it, when I was uh right when I got them, I was going to do some summer classes at a community college, and they let me have my accommodations too.
Okay.
So that kind of helped.
That
But
helps.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that is interesting. I don't know if it will expire or not.
Mm,
But
definitely.
that would
Strange.
make it more challenging.
Very
Yeah.
strange. Definitely. Definitely.
Um, what were some of the accommodations you had?
So definitely extra test time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was allowed like a private quiet room because I get test anxiety very easily. I can't do my test or exam in front of other people. So that was definitely helpful to have.
Mhm.
Extensions on assignments, not so much in college. So the accommodations compared from college to university were so different. In university, my accommodations were a lot more flexible and accommodating
Mm,
compared to my college accommodations. Like, I was never allowed extensions on essays and papers and
hmm,
assignments in college, but then university, I was always allowed extensions up to a week, or my program being disability studies, they allowed me however long I needed, which was
mhm.
really, really nice. But yeah, it just was really, really strange, like in comparison to college, like how many more accommodations I was eligible for in university. So yeah, that was
So
interesting.
did you transfer to university?
So I graduated college, and
Mhm.
then so how it works in Canada, in order to get accepted into certain university programs, they require you to have a college diploma first. So I did two college diplomas. I did child and youth
Mhm.
work, and I did journalism. I didn't do anything with journalism because it wasn't what I wanted to do. I found that out. I love writing, just not
Mhm.
that kind of writing. So
Yeah.
I went into the helping field, and I had to get my child and youth work diploma, and then that's how I was admitted into my disability studies program at university. So that's
Okay.
kind of how it works with certain programs in Canada. I'm not sure about the United States, but that's kind of how we work it in Canada.
Yeah, so with the US, you get accepted on based on filling out an application, and on your application even before then you have to take standardized testing called SAT or
I heard
ACT.
those.
Yeah, yeah.
We don't have those. I'm
Oh,
so
you're
thank I'm
lucky.
sorry. I'm sorry you have to go through those. I've heard how torturous they are, and I can't even imagine like having NVLD and having to write
Hmm.
those. For certain programs in Canada, we might, like, I know my friend, she did the veterinarian technician program. She had to go through the pre-test to see if she had the math skills, and some
Hmm.
nursing programs too, but luckily, we don't have them for most of our programs. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So usually with the ACT was easier because unlike the SAT, it has history and science, and I was good at those subjects. And then SAT is just math and language, like reading
Yeah,
comprehension.
yeah.
So that was challenging for me. I did both, and you basically you give your scores on the application, and
Right.
um, that's not what got me in. My
Yeah.
extracurriculars got me in,
Right.
and showing that even though I didn't have good SAT or ACT scores, I was uh, I was a student all throughout school because I had tutors and
Yeah.
because I applied myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, for sure. I was the same way. Like, I always had tutors, and I always tried my best and tried my hardest. And I think that's what helped me get into college and university.
Hmm.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, we do have standardized testing in my province, Ontario, and I don't agree
Mm,
with it. It's called um grade 3 testing and grade 6 testing, and then I think there's another one in grade 9 they make us
hmm.
do. And it's called the Ontario Literacy Test. So you have to
Mm.
basically do all these like torturous tests of reading comprehension and writing, and just to see like where your child's at and if they're at a certain level, and it's torturous.
Yeah, I
So
agree. It is kind of torture because
yeah,
there's like even if you had extra time for them, like I did in college, you might not do better, or you
yeah,
might.
exactly.
Yeah, I had extra time like you, and I could take tests in a room by myself or with very few people. Um,
Right.
and I could record my lectures, the
Oh
audio.
yeah, I had that option too when I
Yeah,
was in college. Like, in person, online's different. I didn't have that option,
right.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and I could have the audio of my textbooks also.
Okay. Yes. Assistive technology. Yeah.
Yeah,
I do that too. It's helpful because if you're an auditory learner, you can hear it and listen to it back,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes it easier for me to remember it.
Definitely. Definitely.
Because I don't know
Yeah.
with you, but if I try to read a physical book, um, I get so tired and
Me too.
um,
Me too.
I lose my place, and
Yep.
um, it just makes me very sleepy. I don't know if that's NLD or something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that. Or do you find that you don't like, I know when I was younger, it was a lot worse. Like my reading comprehension was a lot worse when I was younger, but
Hmm.
do you find you have to read things like maybe twice to actually like understand what they're trying to say, or you have to
Yes.
go back and reread? So that's something I struggled with a lot, especially in university, not so much college because we didn't have as much reading, but doing a university thesis and
Hmm.
all the readings I had to do, it was torturous. And my gosh, like I had to highlight and had to go back and reread it over and over and over again and make my own notes and
Yeah.
understand what they're trying to say, especially university readings because they're so thick and condensed
Right.
and you have to really go through every little thing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with you on that. Like I remember with my social theory class, even though I would listen to it, I wouldn't get it right away. So I would
Yeah.
meet with my TA, and he helped with that part a lot, which was
Mhm.
good because like
That's awesome.
I couldn't write an essay if I didn't understand
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. And like highlighting the main points and
Right.
it's yeah, I get it. It's challenging.
So I
So,
have two more questions.
sure, sure.
So one of the things I just kind of thought of with college, and maybe you had this in college or before then, if you're comfortable with sharing, did you have an experience where you kind of got embarrassed, like a teacher called on you and you couldn't answer the question?
Um, I wouldn't say college. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like they don't call people out in college and university, but in public school,
Yeah.
definitely. I would almost get like anxious just in fear
Mm-hmm.
that they would put me on the spot, you know? And sometimes I would even like count the number of people ahead of me if we were like reading around, the classroom. Reading was never an issue for me, but I was just always socially awkward and shy.
Yeah.
So it was always difficult being called on in certain classes and being put on the spot. It's yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
just feels really overwhelming and you get anxious and you don't really know how to answer, what to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're always all awkward as it is with NVLD, and that just makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. For me, I, two stories came to my mind when you said the reading around in class. Actually, my I did that with my TA a little bit when we were in the smaller group, and I was nervous with that because when I read, it didn't sound very smooth out
Mhm.
loud, and it sounded very choppy, and I couldn't put emphasis on any places that needed it
Right.
because I didn't know how to. But I could keep track of where I needed to start after somebody. And I got a little bit better when I was doing the podcast, actually, because
That's good.
with the first couple ones, my mom said, "You sound very monotone." And I'm like, "Yeah,
Oh.
I know." um, and she was like, you know, try to put more emphasis or more, you know, happy or sad, whatever the emotion is you need behind the what you're reading. And what
Mhm.
I did, because I was mentioning this to my therapist, that helped was I would listen to movies that were very emotional, like Cinderella, and
Mhm.
try to copy the uh, emotion. And
Okay.
that actually kind of helped because um, I already knew the lines because I of having an LD, um,
Right, right.
and it was fun. So I did that, and then being able to do my podcast became easier with that area. And one of the other stories I was thinking of with being on called with questions. Um, I had this, my professor for social theory, I'm laughing because of remembering what happened. Um, I didn't laugh then, but I did looking back on it now. I was leaving the class to go get more water like I usually do. And
Mhm.
he called on me right as I was leaving
Oh
and passing him.
no.
I'm like, damn it. Cause
Uh,
that was the one time he did it. He just like wanted me to like comment on what he was talking about and what my thoughts were about it. And I know we were going through like the feminist movement in class. I remember that part, but I felt very put on, and I'm like,
yeah, I don't like being put on the spot. I feel like, I don't know, with NVLD, it's almost like we have to like kind of prepare and like
yeah.
know as many details in advance. And um I know too, like I guess the most recent example would be my thesis presentation. Like it
Mm-hmm.
was super disorganized. They didn't put out the schedule until like a week before the presentation was due. So I felt very awkward and like just put on the spot, like not knowing what to
Mm-hmm.
expect and like who would be in such and such order. And I don't know, I'm very detail oriented, so
Me
I
too.
don't like when things get out of place or shuffled and mixed up. I'm like, like I get all scatterbrained and
Yeah.
anxious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Like, I remember when my TA asked me the next day in the small discussion group about how I felt when my professor did that, because he actually thought I did pretty good with answering, commenting on it. And I was like, oh, good, because it didn't feel like it.
It's like I try my best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly. Like with the
Uh,
joking.
yeah.
Um, so kind of wrapping up,
Yeah.
for you, what is your proudest accomplishment that you've had so far?
Oh my gosh. So definitely graduating
Mhm.
university with honors, which I was really happy about.
Yay.
Thank you so much. So just like proving everyone wrong,
Hmm.
just accomplishing that was a huge, huge moment for me. And I guess like, starting my own business and
Mm.
starting Beautiful Minds, like just putting myself out there. And I just really want to help kids with learning disabilities and
Hmm.
those with nonverbal learning disabilities. So just I guess really using, the strengths and weaknesses I have
Right.
and sharing with others and, being able to do certain things. And I feel like with NVLD, like small moments, small accomplishments are huge accomplishments for
Yes.
us. Like,
Agreed.
for you being able to drive, like that's huge. Like, some people can't drive with
Yes.
NVLD. So just like
Yeah.
little accomplishments and things that you never thought you could do, you can do. You just have
Right.
to find a way and figure it out and challenge the status quo, I guess you would say.
Yeah, I agree
Yeah,
with you on that. For me, I have two that come to my mind. For me, it was also graduating college, because I did it with NLD,
that's
and
awesome.
thank you. And I did it um, at a school that was very challenging for me,
That's awesome.
and I was the first woman to graduate in my family from
That's
college.
super exciting. That's super exciting. Yeah, I was the first to graduate as well in my family. We call it,
Hmm.
I don't know if you guys do it in the United States, first generation.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was first generation student. So it's like a huge, huge accomplishment for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. For
Yeah.
me, um, I just remember feeling so proud when I got accepted, and then when I graduated, I was like,
Yeah.
I made it.
Like, yay. I did it. I made it. You proved them
Yeah,
wrong.
right. I did. We both
Yeah,
did.
definitely. Exactly. You should be
Yeah,
really proud of yourself too. That's amazing. That's
yeah.
awesome.
And for me, I'm still very proud of just, I love that I created the podcast, because not only does it help other people, neurotypicals and neurodivergent, understand NLD
Mhm.
better and other learning disabilities, but I just love watching it grow and see
Yeah. I've
how big it's
watched
become.
I know it's so beautiful because I've like seen the success and like watched and listened to your podcast and like been following you for a while. And I'm like, wow, that's like amazing. And then in the back of my head, I'm like, maybe I should start a podcast maybe one day,
Yeah.
just try it. It sounds like fun and super exciting for sure.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
fun. Actually, I was going to ask you, how did you find the podcast?
How did I find the podcast? I think I was in Spotify. I think I was
Hmm.
like searching NVLD just out of curiosity.
Right.
I'm not technology savvy, and honestly, like I was so late with getting Spotify. I was always like the person
Mm,
that would download songs from like YouTube or whatever. So I was searching
hmm.
one night on Spotify and I spotted your podcast. It came up as like the first, I think the first and only NVLD podcast. And
Yeah, there's not that
I
many.
started listening. I was like, oh wow, like this is awesome. And then I just kind of kept listening and kept following. And yeah, it was, kind of a spur of the moment thing for me, a random search, and here we are.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you found it because I know for me when I had the idea almost 2 years ago now, I I knew it would be one of the few out there, because I did a search to see if there were other ones like you did as well, and like only I think one or two came up, and
Hmm.
now I I searched NLD, or usually what I type in on Google is what is NLD.
Yeah.
And because I have a page on my website about that, I'm actually usually I come up above the NBLD project
That's
on the
awesome.
first
Yeah,
page.
no, you're like, that's awesome. That's a huge accomplishment for sure. And I was just about to say that too. Like, I don't think there's any other NBLD specific podcast. So, it's such a blessing to have this and like have
Mm,
this as a resource for so many people. And you're educating and helping educate others about what NBLD is. So that's awesome.
thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
I I feel the same way because for me it's a very proud accomplishment because I created it and I get to see it grow. You
definitely.
know, uh the anniversary is actually coming up in July
That's
of when I started
exciting.
it.
That's so
Um,
cool. Beautiful Minds too is in July.
oh,
That's
cool.
awesome. That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Very
Um,
cool.
what I was going to say is if you do want to start your own podcast, I can help with that because
Oh, awesome.
I did help. You might have heard of her, Linda Carozlis.
Yeah, she is up there too. She does a lot of NVLD
Yeah.
advocacy work and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I I learned about her because of being in some of the NBLD groups on Facebook,
Yeah, me too.
um, and she's an ambassador for the NBLD project too.
Yeah.
I helped her create a podcast about NLD and ADHD.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Very
so
cool. Very
let me know.
cool.
Um,
Yeah, for sure. I'll keep that in mind. That's awesome. I have like a lot more free time now that I'm done
yeah,
university. It's such a weird
feeling.
feeling. And I know we've been trying to like connect for a while and do this. I'm like,
Right.
I'm just so busy with my thesis. It took so much of my time, but yeah, that would be an amazing opportunity for sure.
Yeah, I understood being busy because I remember when I was in school, I was so busy and just
Oh,
focused on
it's
doing
so,
well.
yeah, it's so overwhelming. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And with NVLD too, that's something I guess I forgot to mention too, how
Mm.
much longer it takes us to complete things, like
Oh,
just
yeah.
like work and assignments. I think that's one of the burdens. Like if I could change, that would be one thing because it's so frustrating. And I think different like work environments too, it's definitely
Hmm.
like impacted my work ability because I've had coworkers get mad and frustrated because I might act like I don't know what I'm doing or it
Mm.
might take me longer, and it's like it's not my fault, it's just how I work, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Y-
frustrating.
Yeah, I can relate to that where fortunately my mom understands this, that it takes me longer too, but like in the beginning, when I was working for her, I would make so many mistakes, and sometimes I still
Yeah.
do. But
Yeah.
I try to learn from them and not make the same one again.
Don't beat them. Yeah, don't beat
Yeah.
yourself up over it. Yeah. I feel like we struggle too with like low self-esteem and low
Hmm.
self-confidence with NVLD because like we're our own worst enemies. We're so like hard on ourselves and like
Right.
messing up on simple things like we think we should be able to do, but we
Hmm.
can't, right? So
Yeah, I would
yeah, it
agree
can
with
be
that.
hard. Yeah,
Do you
definitely.
have any questions on your mind before we wrap up?
I don't, not that I can think of.
Okay.
No, I think we kind of covered a lot of different topics and things, which
Hmm.
was awesome. So hopefully I answered all of the questions. If you had any other ones, let me know.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Yeah, thank you.
So thank you for letting me interview you.
Yeah, no problem. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're
It was
welcome.
awesome. Thank you.
I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I'm looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. I also wanted to let you know that I started a Patreon account for this podcast to try to get some more revenue from it. That's not the reason why I started this podcast, but I'm trying to get some revenue from the podcast because it will help me keep it going. Um, so if you are willing to donate even $1 or $2 or $5, whatever amount is comfortable for you, to Patreon for Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, that would be appreciated. You can also use Spotify to donate money, and you can also use BetterHelp to donate money with clicking on the link and becoming a customer of BetterHelp. So, those are 3 different ways you can support the podcast, and I hope that you will choose which way works for you, and that you will choose which level works for you as well. And I hope that you do it because the podcast helps you also, and that you are willing to support me in continuing to produce it. Thank you. And today I am very excited to announce that BetterHelp is now sponsoring this podcast. I have had 7 years of therapy, so I know it can help change your life if you not only let it, but work on the personal goals that you set with your therapist. Without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's more affordable than in person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest
in yourself because you are the greatest asset. And special offering to listeners of Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/. I'll put in the link in the podcast description for you. That's BetterHelp, HELEP. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
So I hope that episode was helpful to you and that you were able to get something out of it and it was meaningful for you, and that you can share that lesson with somebody else that you know who is neurodivergent or neurotypical and will be able to help you with that challenge that you feel like arises for you, or the lesson that you learned from the episode. And I hope that you take some time to journal about what thoughts or feelings came up for you while you were listening. And I hope that you can spread the word about NLD and being neurodivergent and try to spread the awareness with others as well. Thank you for listening to Living with Invisible Learning Challenge. Talk to you next Friday.